All right, I am live, and so is Rob.
What's going on, brother?
Oh, we're doing our thing. We're doing our thing. And if you had told me, um, told younger me that one day I would be able to record something like this remotely from my laptop, I would tell you you were lying. So we'll
No, I
take
think
it.
that's a great point. It's certainly the reason we're even attempting to do this is that we're both in different locations. We want to create a system where we can stay in touch more frequently. And what better way to do that than to connect on things that we're passionate about? And
100%.
these softwares allow us to do that.
Technology has a place. And for all of the concerns that sometimes people have with technology, it's about, again, within the context of the tools and ensuring that we're using it in a proper way and not losing ourselves in them or not over relying. It's that fine balance you and I talk about a lot. Um, and this one's a good one.
Not to belabor the Sora 2 point, we could probably talk about it every week. But I did receive some text messages of enthusiasm created by Sora 2 around the college football weekend. And so it's as a use case, better emojis, better GIFs.
That's great insight. I have a WhatsApp group with a group of college buddies. I was in a fraternity, so these are fraternity brothers, and we still keep in touch years later. And a few folks were definitely using Sora as a way to um, bring the conversation collectively back together, and it was amusing. Some of them are funnier than others, but it is a way to express oneself.
Well, I guess how would we know what funny is if there weren't examples of things that we didn't find funny?
Very good. I will bring that up to them next time I find something that's decidedly not funny or off color.
Well, I have a list of things that I thought would be really compelling to talk about this week, and
I think that's amazing.
we can kind of go through it live here. Founder-led content was something that we both have been seeing a lot in our LinkedIn feed, so I thought that would be super interesting. Work slop has come up again. Riggs Morales entered my feed, hip hop journalist,
Okay.
talking about kind of the shorthand hip hop journalists can have with their audience that you don't see in news journalism. And there's this
Ah,
formality of writing to an audience that, from a like mass media standpoint, you can't get away with, or is frowned upon, maybe. So the idea of writing to a community or a niche audience about a niche topic or a specific topic allows you to reach them directly. Interesting point of conversation. Jeff Tweedy was on Trackstar, which, my God, that's all over my Instagram. It is one of my favorite things going. Wyclef Jean is one of my favorite guest appearances. But Jeff Tweedy's on there talking about being a prolific creator, which ties into the artist's way conversation. And Jeff has written about that as well. I thought that was interesting. And then Arthur Z was named the 25th US Poet Laureate recently. And so one of my favorite podcasts, Tricycle Talks, um, re aired or reposted their interview with Arthur Z from last year, and he talks about the importance of translation. He translates Chinese poetry into English, and the loss that comes with translation, and the renewal that comes out of that loss. Really
amazing.
interesting.
I have nothing to add given the breadth that we can go through with what you have found. So,
Well, I will challenge you on that because the title of this show is Yo Munir, and I'm not going to let you get away with telling me that you have nothing to add because everybody wants to know. Yo Munir, what's in your LinkedIn feed? Yo!
so Rob, you have a phenomenal group of things in your LinkedIn feed that I want to talk about. There are two things, maybe three, that I'll add. So, one is about celebrity tequila. So,
In
it was post
2025, this is a topic?
well, the individual that posted about it is exactly that. He's like, post Casamigos, there have been like, 40 other brands and only two or four have survived post Casamigos. But it touches on things that you and I have spoken about, which is authenticity, the fact that, his point being that when Clooney created Casamigos, he was doing it to solve a problem that he and his friends, his co-founders, had, which was how do we find good tequila? And that these other people all just jumped in without with a business plan and marketing, but not with authenticity. The other piece that has come up is that it's this is not as happy. It was a post that was coming along about the debasement trade. So this is a financial trade, meaning that there is people are buying hard assets. That means gold, oil, physical things, because they are feeling like the US economy in particular and the dollar are being debased or are at risk of losing their value. If you've ever heard Ray Dalio talk, he has been speaking quite a bit and trying to raise the alarm about what happens when empires fall and also when monetary policy changes and when that reserve currency moves. And so this is a very much a moment of when he's on that piece. And then there's this other thing that has popped up about how large HoldCo ad agencies are beginning to have to change their model. Now, that can be an advantage for smaller agencies like myself, but it's a different. He's the gentleman posting from Mercer Island Group, Steve Beeler, was commenting about how there's a move in the market. And so these are all things that tie together. They're all things that tie to things that we have talked about. And I think they also tie into things that you're seeing in your LinkedIn feed. But I'll stop sucking the air out of our podcast.
No, please. Very interesting. And I think currency, uh, no matter the form, is a really interesting conversation here. You and I had once talked about the three C's: cash, credit, or contacts as a
Yes.
value exchange.
Yes. And I had recently, who was I speaking to? Maybe I, so somebody was talking to me about how the difference between Americans and Europeans is that the Americans will talk about money and what they do for work, and the Europeans at a dinner table will talk about life and politics. And it's like the whole how are you trying to get a nut? How are you trying to get the next dollar is something that's a little bit American. And it was somebody that had I'm forgetting who it was, but somebody who was European who had gone back home and was saying that his friends and relatives were commenting about he or she had become Americanized.
I am guilty of two things when I first meet someone. I want to know where they're from an origin standpoint, and get an understanding of what they're rooted in potentially. And I want to know what they do.
Yeah.
Typically, we spend the majority of our time focused on work. And
Hmm.
so I'm curious to connect on that level. Not
Hmm.
everybody is interested in talking about what they do.
Well, I think this is kind of the point that this individual was making is that we default to that. And you could default to what do you believe? You could default to like, all sorts of stuff. But we default to what you just said. Where are you from and what do you do for a living? And in other places, that's not common or as common. And I think we sometimes lose track or lose focus on that.
Well, speaking of loss, I think that's a pretty good segue into Arthur Z. I was introduced to Arthur Z last year when he was on the Tricycle Talks podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And he was talking about the work that he does to translate these ancient Chinese poems into English. And you have to imagine all the different layers that come into play, the characters, the meanings, voice inflection and tonality is so critical in Chinese, and the
Mm-hmm.
impact that you have and the responsibility in some ways that you have as a translator. But there's a great line in that breaking down the language to renew the meaning. It was really interesting. Um, he was talking about how there were pauses after every line of poetry within the Chinese language for this particular poem that he was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and that it wasn't a one for one exchange where he couldn't use the pause in English in the exact same place as it existed in Chinese. And so he had to make a decision using his own opinions and influence and creativity of where that pause should be. And I thought that was really
Amazing.
interesting, connecting back to some of the conversations we've had about pause and its usefulness. That's it. That's what. Nice one. I
I,
kept
I
talking.
was
I
trying.
talked through
Yeah,
the
I was.
pause.
I I was trying to do that for you. I let that hang for a minute.
I hate to do
Pausing
this.
is it's a very powerful tool um, in meetings and in conversation. And I think people do forget to pause. People are so excited to tell you, and I'm very guilty of this. So excited to tell you what they think that they forget that they're supposed to also be receiving and listening. And a pause can be an effective tool to start to remind yourself of that. But it also is incredibly powerful from whoever blinks first, like from a negotiation perspective, because you learn a lot if you're willing to sit in silence and you allow others to do the talking.
We talk about this all the time in pricing conversation, and it feels very crass to pivot from something artistic and creative into a conversation about capitalism and making money. However, the pause after you present pricing in a conversation or a negotiation with a prospect is really important. Don't talk through, don't present the value and wait.
Yes, you are so correct. And value is also a multi layered system. You have to believe in the value of the product, work, or service that you are presenting. As marketers, I want my marketing team and my agency to believe, I mean, truly believe. We talk about authenticity, authentically and truly believe in the value that they deliver. Because if for a moment they don't believe in the value that they're delivering, then they're undervaluing not only themselves, but the product as well as who they represent. And that's not necessarily fair because we take a lot of time as a team training, delivering, nurturing, providing support for. I'm in a human capital business. And so my product are my people, and my people are valuable. We spend a lot of time selecting them. And then once we have a relationship together, As a team, we spend a lot of time building our teamwork. And we can work faster and better than others because of that. And that has a value. And so that conversation about value and authenticity is very, very relevant, not only from a pricing perspective, but also self-belief. We talk about self-actualizing sometimes together. We talk about ways to feel good as people, but some of that is inherent in this conversation as well.
You started talking about tequila and the authenticity behind what George Clooney and his team were doing with Casamigos and the reason for its success. And as part of this conversation with Arthur Z, um, the topic of Buddhism and Taoism come up, and Taoism is practicing non-action and learning non-attachment and not attaching to outcomes, which
Yes.
also made me think of the Tao of Pooh, which was a book I remember from your bedside table. And I don't remember the age. I don't remember if you remember reading that and whether it was assigned to you, it was a choice you made, at what point in life that was. Do you remember reading that book?
100% remember reading that book. It's still on my bookshelf. I don't think anybody assigned it to me. I think I had, as I did, but pre-internet, somebody was talking about it or I'd heard about it. It was at a bookstore. I bought it. I read it. It's really easy. It's like a, quick thing. I always liked Winnie the Pooh, but the Tao of Pooh is just such a brilliant sort of unpacking of these characters in this Buddhist philosophy and the idea of um, the character of Pooh being, we perceive him to be naive, and yet there's a brilliance to that within of Buddhist culture. The naive mind is like something you aspire to, and so it takes a whole different lens to a story well. And I came to it. I don't remember how old I was. I don't remember whether it was, you know, it was definitely beyond junior of high school, I would say. I mean, I'm guessing at that, but like, and then I don't know though whether it was in my 20s or in my late teens. I used to tell people, not not uh, not 100% lying, that I was probably more mature my senior year of high school than my senior year of college, but that's a discussion for another day. But the concept of I don't know Arthur Z's work, so apologies. But I have read a bit, not just the Tao of Pooh, but I've read a bit about Chinese philosophy and Confucianism. I've studied Confucianism. I've studied some of like the Sun Tzu, and so there's and the history that the Chinese culture has and that sense of space, which is I'll put a marketing spin to this. So it's understanding your audience and your personas. And so the incredible thousands of years of history that Chinese culture brings to telling a story or a poem, and the work that Arthur Z is doing to try to unpack not just the language, but the cultural context and the time. I mean, that's the power, is the people all come to the story with some of their own background and beliefs. And as marketers, we're trying to again connect those their realities to what we can do for and with them. Um, and then there, we love research, and so researchers will try to unpack for us, what people's belief systems are. And then you have these savants in this world. And it's the famous Ford quote, if I'd asked my customer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And Steve Jobs was probably the other, like, just brilliant at able to predict what people might want. Although the phone plus iPod was probably something forced upon him, he still was able to, like, go, okay, we'll go all in on this. But that capacity to predict future want based on past, based on input, um, but not take it at face value, and understanding cultural context. So Arthur Z, cultural context, and I'll bring this and bring it back to something else you talked about, which was
Riggs Morales, yeah.
Riggs Morales. So internal groups have internal speak and the in group, right? And so the in group knows the language, which creates the in group, and then the out group, those that don't understand the language. And you were talking about how Riggs Morales was discussing how hip hop journalism was able to use a shorthand because there was an expectation that the audience came to the party with some knowledge. And these are things and levers that exist in this world, and how much of that, in crowd wink and nod, if you will, can you provide? Um, and then are you threatened as a brand trying to be something for everybody and all inclusive? Or are you really okay with being like, you get us or you don't? And if it's like knowing at In and Out, double double animal style. Well, animal style is not on the menu. So you're now in the in crowd by knowing those, menu items that are not on the menu. And that brings people to the product. So there are Easter eggs in games. So if you know, you know. So these are all ways of saying, oh, you get me, or I get you. And different brands have different reasons for being. Like some can get away with that and some can't, or some don't want to. Do I want to be all inclusive, or do I want to be exclusive and for my crowd, if it will, if you will.
That's great. And it's something that driving around town where I live is very recognizable to me because the owner of the local pharmacy is very political and outspoken and showcases that on his own vehicles, on his pharmacy vehicles, in his pharmacy. And there's a Walgreens down the street that you would never see that from. And so it plays out within community as well of who your audience is, who you want to be portrayed as, and what you can do as an independent business versus what the expectations are of a one for all, so to speak, corporation.
Yeah, I mean, we see this increasingly now as we have polarization in our society. It used to be a lot more overlap, and then the there's a Marshall McLuhan quote: "The media is the message." Marshall McLuhan, he's a '60s professor of media, and he wrote a book, Understanding the Media, and he talks about a quote that it's attributed to him because he did write it, but it came from somewhere else. I can't remember, but because I dug into it because I was curious. But it's like we make our tools, and then our tools make us. And so we made social media to try to stay connected, and in fact, what it's done is drive us apart algorithmically because the algorithm is giving us more of the dopamine, the rat on the lever stuff we've talked about. So, how do we in that society start to bring ourselves back together? Or do we? Because do we care? I mean, you've been talking about I'm forgetting the gentleman who wrote the piece about media is like
Oh,
all
Doug
mar or
Shapiro.
Doug
All
Shapiro.
content is media. All media is
All
marketing.
co- all media is marketing, right? So that's a great, that's a great 2020s quote. And it's kind of like builds on what McLuhan said. So where does that lead to at the end of the day?
So I think what ties a lot of this all together is the founder-led content approach, where we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about messaging, we're talking about reaching your audience, and especially in the B2B world, what I've seen work overwhelmingly to generate interest in your brand is if your brand has an actual face and human to it that your prospects can connect with.
100%. I think this. exactly what you're saying in this world of hyperfragmentation and in lots of choice as well, because there's lots of choice. The capacity to humanize your brand and then the capacity to take a founder led approach is more and more impactful. Now, some might call it a cult of personality, and there's definitely a lot of that going on. Um, but I do think that when the founder is willing to say, or the leaders of the company are willing to be out front about their product, about their service, and essentially vulnerable to the slings and arrows that might come from taking the stand to say that my product is good, there is that pull. It's it's authority. There's a behavioral psychology theory behind that.
Undoubtedly, there are Apple scholars who have studied this and written about this, but it reminds me of the Steve Jobs Apple versus the Tim Cook Apple.
That's a great point, Rob. I think, and if you look at Jensen Huang at Nvidia is taking the Jobsian approach, if you will. He's on stage, he's making announcements, he is putting stuff in front of people that is predictive of their needs, not their actual wants. What do they want? They want a faster chip. What is he showing them? A robot made with Disney that has personality. And if you remember that, I mean, that was in my LinkedIn feed months ago, but it's still sticking. And those ideas that are planted. I just watched Inception with my son,
Okay.
and part of the movie, Christopher Nolan, shout out to Christopher Nolan. The idea in that one is you're planting a seed in someone's mind, and the seed that you plant can grow over time. And those ideas that Jensen is putting in front of people are sticking. And look at Elon, love him or hate him. Elon was very much in front of the Cybertruck release, for better or for worse. He was out front in Doge. Again, love him or hate him, he was owning it. And, he's retreated behind, because sometimes you have to level set, but he's been effective at being an out front leader. And I think that is a trend. And I think you're seeing people report on metrics. Now, I haven't done an independent study. I've just been taking other people's metrics in my LinkedIn feed at face value, but they're saying that it's effective from a performance-based marketing perspective and from a, business results perspective.
I think for another episode, we might also have to talk about the grace given to male founders to show the type of behavior that an Elon Musk shows versus what a woman founder may be judged by and be able to get away with. And so that could be an interesting topic of conversation for a future episode.
Yeah, well, take Sarah Blakely at Spanx. I mean, she was killing it, and then she had performance-based heels, and has been somewhat less successful, I think. Although, at least I saw it pop, and then it's kind of filtered away, and I don't know whether that's indicative of it not succeeding or it just didn't hit my feed anymore because she's launched and she's cruising. But she's a phenomenal founder who was also upfront and out front. But to your point, I mean, yeah, I mean, that is a cultural phenomenon that we can talk about for a lot.
I'd like to transition to some of the topics that you brought up at the start and see whether they're, you mentioned NVIDIA. We talk about AI a lot. We understand the energy and the resources required to power these systems. And maybe that's the connection point to the conversation around natural resources and
Um,
debasement you were talking about
well,
in regards to gold
di-
and oil, or is that not a direct?
it's a little bit of a difference in my mind. It's different, but maybe related. I mean, right now, if you think about the geopolitics behind debasement. It's a lack of trust within the U.S. economy and U.S. currency, and the fact that it might be an early indicator that we're shifting from a dollar-based economy to potentially a yuan-based economy, which means China is building a system to be able to be an alternate reserve currency. Reserve currency is more of an economics, macroeconomics discussion. How does it fit into marketing? Well, we all live in the larger economy. The idea of AI and power generation, I think, is more about. I'll give you one. So what I was seeing in my feed related to that would be that the cost of solar and renewables in a lot of places is now cheaper than oil. And this is again now we're talking manufacturing, less marketing. But there was a long time where the uh, marketing of renewables was about the cost benefit over time, but also about the just you feel good. But what I'm hearing in my LinkedIn feed, at least, is that, oh, no, it's actually cheaper. The issue that we have is that culturally, the US, which is the largest consumer of a lot of this stuff, is now retrenching and retreating from renewables, even though it may actually be cheaper. Strange. So that's a marketing discussion because why is it bad? Like, if it's cheaper and it's renewable, why is it bad? Well, it's marketing. It's being marketed as bad.
I have some people I think we could bring on to talk about that one too.
Great.
Extends beyond my expertise. So, which is maybe also why I hide behind asking questions, is because I don't have to be authoritative or opinionated, and thus be vulnerable in positioning myself as someone who has an opinion or is knowledgeable. And it's an easy excuse. I'll save this for therapy, but
It's a good, I mean, half of what we're doing perhaps is therapy. Yeah, I think the perfectionism approach is something that also hurts marketers sometimes if you are unwilling to put yourself out there and make a mistake. And we've talked about that as well, which is um, you don't want to be crass and you don't need to be catastrophic, but there's a fear behind action or taking a stand. And that fear can lead to inaction and it can lead to no action. And we've also talked about the fact that, no action is a choice. And it's not always the best choice. So sometimes trying something and reframing it with yourself, like, you know what, it's an A/B test. Okay, so now I have a reason. And if it's a test, it's okay if it's wrong because I'm testing. But there are ways that we as marketers sometimes do nothing or try to be something for everybody when really we shouldn't be. We should be able to um, pick a position, make a statement, believe in ourselves, believe in our statement, believe in our product, believe in our service, and go. And oftentimes that's hard because of exactly what you just said. It leaves you vulnerable to somebody else, somebody that you might like, somebody that you want to have as your customer, or somebody that is near and dear to you saying, I don't agree with you. And that leaves you then exposed. And what you do next is also indicative of who you are and how you deal with it. There have been some, um, I'm thinking about a CEO that was caught on camera doing something he probably shouldn't have been. And his reaction was why it became a thing. He knew he was wrong. And um, how you are contrite about how you are wrong is important. And also how you make amends if you really do know that you were wrong when you did the thing. Maybe the slight variance here is that there was a known ill versus, just trying something and being wrong.
I think that's what I've uncovered through our first few episodes here that I wasn't expecting, is the feeling that arises when I say something and in my head I'm questioning whether or not I should have said it. And it's quite remarkable because to me, that's also tied to my lack of, maybe not lack, but my unwillingness to play music more and learn the guitar. Somebody on YouTube was like, if you can play the F chord in guitar, that's like the threshold moment. Just get past playing the F chord. And I spent 6 weeks playing the F chord. And I was like, God damn this F chord, man. It's not going to work out for me. And I zip up the guitar and I put it back in the corner and I stop. And then there's Jeff Tweedy out here saying, just make time, an hour a day, to write one song. And I think what I admire most about Jeff is he is prolific. He's not concerned about what, maybe not concerned, maybe this is not the right approach, but he just put out a 30-song album, maybe. And his willingness to put music out. Taylor Swift just put out another album. How does she do that? It's amazing. It's amazing that musicians and artists are willing to put music out, and maybe there's some detachment from every song being an emotional part of you. It's work. It's what you do. So you can like it or not, but this is my job. The way I have to go through the process of researching a prospect or emailing them or I can't be emotionally connected every point of that process. Otherwise, I'm never going to get anything done.
I think that you have a capacity to connect with people throughout that process, even when you not know it just from your years of experience. But that's a different discussion. I think Tweety and his willingness to put himself out there, but also do the work, as you suggest. They talk about the great writers. The great writers put aside that time to write, even when they don't like anything that they write that day. But they put the time aside to sit in front of their typewriter or their laptop and they write. Even if it's thrown out, they write. And I think that part of that process of showing up is really, really important. And I think that Jeff and his capacity to create. We had some feedback. A friend of mine emailed me and goes, "You're braver than I am," and that was about us doing this. And so, whether you think you are or not, you're perceived as brave because here we are, putting ourselves out there and talking about things and being okay with other people looking at us and potentially judging us for what we say.
Yeah, I think being in your company, in your presence, is what makes it feel safer for me to use that term. We talk about spaces and safe space, and so I appreciate that.
So that ties into a guy named Mark Griffin, who is phenomenal, rugby player and now executive coach. And I was on his podcast. And part of his work with his clients is to try to have his clients create a purpose for themselves. And so we did this live because Mark is that good. And I'm like, I didn't know I was going to be doing this. But what we teased out was, my purpose is to provide people with the permission to be as good as they can be. And so I'm glad that I can give you the permission to be the best you can be.
Amazing. Here's a big virtual hug for you. Thank you.
Feel it.
Love you, buddy.
You too, man. I love you too. Let's be clear.
Thank you. That feels like a, a good place.
All right. End scene. Nice to talk to you, Rob. We'll see you soon.
Always a pleasure. Love you. And we'll see you on LinkedIn.
Yo!